Is a new Badgers recruiting target back on the market? Where do the Badgers stand with the defensive lineman out of California that they once had a pretty good shot for? All that and more in today's Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers, making it one of your first listens every day, your team every single day. Also like to thank LinkedIn, being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We're going to bring John Garcia Jr. on the show, longtime friend of the show, Sports Illustrated recruiting director, Locked On's football recruiting insider. John, thank you again so much for always taking time.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk Badgers, Ryan.
Let's do it. So Ashton Sanders, I want to start here. Defensive lineman out of California, 6'3", 6'4", 300-pounder. Took an official to Madison. At the time, it was really Wisconsin and Cal. And a lot of people thought he would end up in Madison. Took the Cal visit, committed there. Ashton's decommitted from Cal. What are we hearing about his recruitment? Are the Badgers back in this?
I think they are. And I think a few programs have reached out to him. But what's interesting is he told 24/7 that he reached out to Wisconsin. So he kind of rekindled, or at least initiated, rekindling the relationship. So I think Sanders clearly is still very interested in the Badgers. Like you said, it was a Cal-Wisconsin race. Cal won initially. Now he has backed off of that Cal commitment, and it appears as if he's truly moved on from the Bears. And it will be a totally wide open recruitment going forward. So, the Oregons of the world have jumped in with at least initial interest. He's reciprocated that interest to Wisconsin. So I do think that the ball can shift back to the Badgers court in this case. And look, he's an interesting prospect, a guy who plays both ways. We love that, on an evaluation perspective. And he's a guy who's obviously incredibly smart on top of it, with that Cal scholarship offer. So there's a lot of safety and high floor stuff when you're talking about Ashton Sanders as a football player and seemingly as a person as well. So certainly the type of player that fits what Wisconsin wants to do.
Any idea what happened at Cal? Like why he really wasn't committed there long, and it seems like it fell out pretty quick.
Yeah, I think the combination of the other visits and having room to take more visits, that combined with the season getting here just is a natural time for reflection. The dead period brings that out of a lot of prospects. We've seen several decommitments over the last few weeks, very high profile even. Top 5 player in the country, Keon Keeley, decommitted from Notre Dame the other day. So it's a time of year where if you haven't taken all your officials, and just like Keon, Ashton hasn't, it just kind of makes you think, like, is this something I did too early? Can I get out on some more trips and really see what my true value is? And depending on the coaching staff, and I'm not sure how Cal views this, there's a lot of coaching staffs that don't want their commitments taking visits. So the thought is, if you're going to take a visit, decommit, because you're not really committed to us anyway. Clemson is very stern on that policy. We're learning Notre Dame is becoming one of those programs that wants their commitments to stay put. So that becomes a scenario where, you either stay or you decommit if you want to take those trips. And I do think kids want to use the allotment of those 5 official visits. And again, the season is here. It's obviously early in the season. There's a bunch of really great games nationally to look into. So it's just kind of that time of year where kids are starting to think about that a whole lot more. And perhaps other schools were calling, wondering, hey, can we get you up for a game? Can you come check us out one more time before all is said and done, type of thing. So often it's multiple reasons why you back off of a commitment like this. But sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it's like, hey, I just want to see what's out there. But there's no doubt, regardless of why, that Sanders is very interested in Wisconsin, and he's going to have some additional interest to consider as well. So it could mean that this recruitment starts to push well into the season before it's done for real this time.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you that. So it's a good lead in. This feels to me like a recruitment that is kind of like a reset. Like he didn't commit to Cal to go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's on the table, but now it's going to play out a little bit longer. Is that the same kind of feel?
Yeah, it seems like Wisconsin wasn't as prevalent with him after the Cal commitment, which happens, right? I mean, not every program recruits every kid at the same rate, whether they're committed or not. A lot of programs, out of respect, back off and say, "Okay, you made your decision. We'll take a step back and go from there." So the fact that he had to initiate contact with Wisconsin, I think says that it wasn't going to be a traditional flip or anything like that. And
Mhm.
Wisconsin wasn't hammering him in the meantime in his DMs and all that stuff. So I do think that probably leads to some time here. I think he's going to vet some of these new options that maybe he didn't have before the Cal commitment, and certainly, look to rebuild the relationship with Wisconsin and some other programs that could have been involved at one point in time. This kid who had double-digit offers, so naturally, a lot of schools might be already recruiting him before he decommitted, or seeing the decommitment on the 14th and saying, "Let's give him a call. Let's see where we're at in this conversation." So, yeah, I do think there's still some time, especially with the visits that he could potentially take. I think up to 3 official visits going forward. I think there's going to be some time before a final decision, but I do expect it to be the last call for him. He doesn't seem like a me kid who wants to play the game just to
Mhm.
play the game. It seems like those things happen for a reason, which is part of the reason why I don't think Cal will remain under consideration going forward.
That's interesting. I want to finish here with Ashton. Go back to his game a little bit. We talked about the ability play both ways, versatility. He's a kind of a brute. He's already a bit of a college-sized defensive lineman. High school film, they put him on the inside, the outside. Where do you see him best, and specifically for Wisconsin that plays a 3-4?
I think he could be your interior guy in the 3-4, and that's something that is really hard to project from a mentality standpoint. You need a grunt. You need that
Hmm.
brute who is really, really strong at the point of attack, plays with great leverage and a high motor all simultaneously. And we get that in this Ashton Sanders video that's available. The first play, he drives his offensive lineman like 5 yards into the backfield and makes the tackle for loss on top of that. So there's a whole lot of leverage and lower body power on display within his game. But then, like you said, when he works on offense at tackle or even split out as a defensive end, we see some motor, we see some
Hmm.
running ability, even. So I do think that he's got that foundation for that position to be either your typical occupier of blockers to free up some of the second level guys, or a guy who one-on-one with a center or guard has an opportunity to not only collapse the pocket with power, but show a little bit of movement skill and actually, pressure the quarterback or the ball carrier from an angle. So I do think that there's a really nice floor and foundation in his game. He was really good on offense too, so that was kind of interesting to me as well. He reached blocks some guys that were smaller and faster than he was. So there's some lateral ability there, and clearly some nice IQ to go along with it. It seems like he's attacking the right shoulder and winning with leverage on just about every snap that we do get to see. So I think there's a lot to like about the floor with Sanders. I don't know if he's got the highest ceiling in the class. He's not the longest prospect, from a height and weight
Hmm.
standpoint, where you're going to be able to disengage without that power. But he does, to me, have enough power to make that the foundational element of his game overall. And he's a better fit in a 3-4 versus your conventional 4-3 or hybrid look up front. So I do think there's a nice fit there schematically with Wisconsin.
That's an awesome scouting report. Hopefully, the Badgers stay on him. Somebody that a lot of Badger fans are excited about. Coming up on Locked On Badgers, we're going to ask John the eternal question: where are the Badgers going at quarterback? What's happening next there? That's coming up on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net remains the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports, all your favorite events. Number one online source for lines, odds, movements, sports news too. It's not just sports betting, sports news, newsletters, podcasts. Everything is on BetOnline. Online Vegas casino games, blackjack, roulette. It really is just a one-stop shop. It's a reason why we use it at Locked On. It's become our favorite sports betting website, our favorite sports betting tool. Find, again, reviews, news of all the leagues, esports, UFC. Everything is on there. BetOnline, it continues to be your online resource for all of your live in-game betting, for all your futures. Everything is there. Do it responsibly. But, pennant races, I talk about it all the time. Not just college football, pennant races. A lot of people listen to this show, fans of multiple sports. Pennant races are heating up. Go, put some money on a team that you think has a good chance to win a division. Where is Kevin Durant going to end up? Who's going to win the Western Conference for basketball? Who's going to win the AFC North? All of that is on BetOnline. Great spot for futures. Right now, Wisconsin is 8.5 over/under season win total. Everything's on BetOnline. Do it responsibly. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I also want to say Ultimate College Football Previews here. This is something really special Locked On's doing with episode preview, college experts, local team experts, Odyssey college football insiders. The season's right here. There's no better way to get primed for it than this. Everything you need to get ready for the college season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. I want to thank everyone again for making Locked On Badgers one of your first listens. We're here every day for your team. We're going to bring John Garcia back on the show. As always, grateful for his insight. John, tell us a quarterback is committing this week. Tell us Wisconsin is on the precipice of doing this. Where are we turning at quarterback? Do you think it might be more of a portal situation?
Yeah, I'm starting to think the portal is going to make a little bit more sense. Because, look, you're in that conundrum of, do we go flip a guy? Which, again, if we go back to Ashton Sanders really quick, not a lot of communication between both parties once he was committed. So is Wisconsin not – I mean, this might be a whole different case study that you actually have the answer to more so than me. Maybe Wisconsin isn't in the flip game. Maybe they're not into that part of the conversation. Maybe Sanders is an isolated case, but the most recent sample we have says that guys who were targets, who made decisions, Wisconsin backs off to respect those decisions, as every kid asks for on Twitter, it seems like. So maybe the flip game isn't the most conventional for Wisconsin. And look, it's hard to flip a quarterback. It's only happened, I think there's 5 or 6 quarterbacks that have flipped in this entire cycle. The one in the Midwest who was starting to gain traction, Jackson Smolik, he did flip Tulane to Penn State, so he will play in the Big Ten, just not for Wisconsin. So I think he was kind of regionally the most interesting name to keep an eye on. There are other prospects that are on the board that are interesting. Raheem Jeter is a big physical quarterback from the East Coast. I think he's from South Carolina, just decommitted from West Virginia. Is there a good fit there relative to Wisconsin? I'm not entirely sure, but he is back on the market. But I think there's a lot more volume when you're talking about the portal. We've already seen some of these fall camp battles at quarterback come to a heed. And, at USF named Gary Bohannon, the Baylor transfer, their starter, Timmy McClain, the backup, already hit the portal like immediately. And there's actually buzz that he's going to come off the board to another school here soon. So we're going to start to see a lot of these battles end, and a quarterback, a QB1 being named, right? Nebraska, Texas, Auburn, LSU, right off the top. These battles are going to lead to more kids in the portal. Ole Miss is another one that's really interesting and ongoing. It's going to lead to more prospects hitting the portal. So again, there's going to be an opportunity to bring in a guy with legitimate Power 5 or FBS experience, even if it's not a ton of game experience, a talented player who has competed at the very highest level to battle to be QB1 at some of these programs. Oklahoma, could be another one. Arizona State just named Emory Jones their guy. So there could be some attrition there in their quarterback room as well. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity in the next really week or two to find a new name that can jump in the portal. And those guys are going to do so quickly because they don't want to lose eligibility. They don't want to get into a scenario where they're going to be a backup and need to come in and spot duty and lose an entire year of eligibility. I think most of those quarterbacks that lose these battles are going to want to hit the portal and start getting recruited immediately. So I do think the timing of right now is really advantageous for programs that are still without a quarterback in this class. And look, Wisconsin's not alone here. There are some big-time programs. Georgia just won the national title, don't have a quarterback committed. Texas A&M won the recruiting title. They don't have a quarterback committed at the moment. Auburn doesn't have a quarterback committed. I mean, there's a lot of programs that can do some things that don't have that QB1 established. And I do think that there's this balance of we don't want to settle, and there's going to be a lot of options here in the next little bit. So I do think that the portal will be popping at the quarterback position, maybe more than all others combined over the next 2 weeks, because those guys don't want to lose the eligibility. So if I'm Wisconsin, I'm probably going that route. Maybe you vet a couple of targets that are committed elsewhere. But again, it does seem like that's not Wisconsin's thing. That's more, built for somebody else. So with respect to that, I think the portal's starting to make more and more sense, especially with the timeline of these fall camp battles starting to wind down.
No, and that's really interesting because one of the questions I had from someone who listens to the show was specifically about that, the fall camp battles. Is that a place where Wisconsin could go in and poach somebody when they go to the portal? And to me, that would be really looking for a younger player with upside, right? Because you're not bringing somebody in
Sure.
from the portal to compete this year. It's too late for that. And I
Correct.
mean, yeah, I don't know. Has that ever happened to your knowledge, like this late in the game?
I don't think they would be able to. I think it's different per conference, but most of the deadlines for eligibility the same year, I think, are like in May or June. So
Oh,
we're
okay.
already well past that point. So anybody you would be coveting in the portal right now would be for January. It would be for the beginning of the spring ball cycle for the 2023 college football season. So yeah, I mean, I think you would probably go younger. That's generally how it goes. Syracuse is another battle that comes to mind. They've got like 3 or 4 transfers of their own competing there. Michigan, I mean, that could be something
Yeah.
down the line. How does Ohio State's backups stack up? But beyond CJ Stroud, it's not even about the starter. Sometimes QB2 could be its own battle that creates some portal movement. Again, these kids want to play now.
I
It's
mean, we
really
saw.
it's more apparent than it's ever been that there's not a whole lot of patience in the modern quarterback. The Mac Jones story of being that fifth-year guy and waiting it out behind Jalen Hurts and Tua and all that. I mean, that is going to become even more rare. It already feels rare saying it out loud. It's going to become even more so going forward because there's just so much player power and movement and ability to make that change. So yeah, I think that's, as I talk about it more, I'm like, yeah, I think that's what's going to happen for not only Wisconsin but a lot of these schools that are still, figuring out, the balance of trying to flip somebody versus just waiting it out for an older, mature, more experienced player.
Well, and we saw it with Quinn Ewers, right, at Texas too, or Ohio State to Texas, I should say.
Right.
Players aren't waiting. So I want to finish up here. So we talked about transfer portal, fall battles, potentially flipping somebody. Where does the FCS level programs fit into all this? Is that a timetable that? I mean, do they hit the? I don't even know the answer to this. Do they hit the portal at the same time? Like, could they transfer at the same time, or is that more of an off-season thing?
I still think, yeah, I think any addition has to be in the right time of year. And look, those guys are going to get their seasons going as well. And that's not a bad avenue to look at. We've seen a few FCS quarterbacks come up to the FBS and Power 5 level and have a real opportunity. I think Cam Ward over at Washington State is going to be the guy. And he's going to put up big numbers as a legitimate dual threat up in the Pac-12 in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, I think that's going to become a little bit more prevalent in how programs really just pay attention to college football. I mean, as I'm talking, there's more battles popping up in my head. I'm like, Washington is an interesting battle, right? Michael Penix, Sam Heward, the legacy. I mean, there's a lot of talent that may not be QB1, in the next week or two. And I think that's going to be really interesting to navigate for not only those programs trying to hold on to those guys because they want to, but also everyone else kind of keeping an eye on it. Hey, do you call the high school coach and say, hey, is he leaning towards the portal?
Right.
There's a lot of ways around the communication, the legalities of communication. So yeah, I think the combination of that, the FCS, and then let's also not forget, a late breaking high school quarterback, a kid who just goes crazy as a senior who maybe got hurt as a junior or doesn't have the available tape. Maybe a kid can play his way into the Power 5 this fall. Jackson Dart, who's, maybe going to be QB1 at Ole Miss and was at USC and played as a true freshman last year. 0 Power 5 offers at this time 2 years ago going into his senior season. But then he broke a bunch of Utah passing records and he became this great national recruit at the end of the cycle. So there's still an opportunity for quarterbacks to kind of play their way into some considerations late in the cycle. So I do think generally it's going to work out for these programs, especially the good ones, right? The stable ones, Georgia, Texas A&M, Wisconsin. I think they're more inclined to land a quarterback via the portal or a late riser than some of the newer coaching staffs or those that aren't as established, like your Auburns of the world that are still trying to figure things out.
That's great insight. Really quick, if you could, because you stumbled onto a great connection to Wisconsin here with accidentally. Wisconsin plays Washington State this year, week 3, or week 2, sorry. So Cam Ward, can you give us Badger fans a 30 to 45-second, very quick overview? What kind of player are we going to look at there?
Yeah, prolific passer who really pushes the ball down the field incredibly well. And then he's expanded like his versatility as a runner, a guy who can legitimately make work outside the pocket. Not the biggest guy in the world, so I'm not sure they will. And we don't know how this new Washington State offense will look either. I'm not sure they're going to design runs for him, but when things do break down, he becomes a player that can hurt you with his legs. So I do think Jim Leonard's side of the ball is going to have to put a spy on him or try to create a contained pass rush in that approach. And that puts more onus on your secondary. So naturally, you've got to be more prepared to cover a little bit longer, which is just harder for anybody at any level. Look, should Wisconsin be much more talented almost across the board? Yes. Should their secondary be able to handle Wazoo's receivers? Yes. But Cam Ward does help to blur that margin just a little bit. And he's a guy who was getting some NFL consideration after what he did last year. I think he was in the FCS Heisman conversation, and really played his way into some NFL talks, especially because last year's quarterback class wasn't that great coming out of college football. So him foregoing that does create, more of a chip on his shoulder, and he's got a lot to prove out there. And yeah, that game that early, which I definitely wasn't aware of 20 seconds ago, that's going to be big for him. That's going to be really big for him, and that will help to dictate, some of that perception. Because when you go against the reigning number 1 defense in the country, you're going to be judged at a different level than when you're in the Pac-12 playing against, no disrespect, UCLA and Arizona State and some of those schools.
No, for sure. Awesome answer. Coming up, we're going to keep John Garcia on the show. One more segment, big Badgers practice facility coming. We're going to talk about how that might impact recruiting. What are recruits really looking for? Do facilities matter? Exposure matter? All that coming up on Locked On Badgers with John Garcia Jr. Bringing John Garcia Jr. back on the show. John, so we just had some news break. This just kind of broke yesterday, which coincidentally happened at the same time of the media deal, right? Announcement with the Big Ten.
Coincidentally, yes.
Coincidentally, right? So Wisconsin announced a $300 million new practice facility. Wisconsin's practice facility has been pretty old. They don't even have a 100-yard indoor facility. It's like this wonky kind of thing. Long story short, how much do facilities really matter? And I know every recruit is different, but just in the broad sense.
Well, they matter more up north. I mean, there's no other way around that. You need to be able to get legitimate work in 12 months a year. In the South, in the SEC, in the ACC, Big 12, not a big deal. You've always had that you've always had that opportunity. But if it's pouring snow or icy or whatever, now you have a true counter to that can allow you to get some work in it. And then look, aesthetically, yeah, it's important, right? I mean, you're a program that doesn't recruit hyper locally, right? So you've got to bring in players from across the country, right? The entire Midwest. We know the expectation of Wisconsin down south, which is a growing footprint. You've got to create this first impression that, look, on campus, your box is checked, right? Everybody knows how beautiful the campus is up there, the city, the town. Those boxes are checked and in a great way. So if you complement that with pretty shiny new toys, which is what facilities are, it only helps to enhance that first impression. And for a lot of Wisconsin targets in particular, you may only get one visit in the recruitment. It just geographically, it just is what it is. So you've got to nail the first impression. So yes, that stuff does matter when you start to focus more on the overall living situation and just availability of options to hang out in, work out in, recover, locker room, all that stuff. It all comes together to make a true first impression. So you want to have that as glitzy and glammy as possible. And it won't be the fanciest, I'm sure, because that's not Wisconsin's brand, but you got to push that to a certain degree. The renderings look really cool. $300 million is a lot of money. So you can only imagine how much will actually be, outfitted, in the facilities. It's right next to Camp Randall, which is really cool. You want kind of that all encompassing, football town kind of vibe. So I think this will enhance that as well. And yeah, look, on the surface level, you need a bigger indoor. You need to be able to get it in 12 months a
Mhm.
year. It helps with your preseason, it helps with your in-season maintenance, and even the optical stuff like pro days and combines and camps and stuff like that. It really does help enhance kind of that overall view of how serious Wisconsin, the university, takes football. So I do think that it only helps in perception, and it's important in recruiting. It used to be, the weight rooms, like the weight rooms were like the thing, and then it became the locker rooms, and now they're all digital and all that. But now it's everything: the indoor, the
Mhm.
stadium itself, the jumbotron. It's every element now gets weighed because kids are able to take more visits than ever before. So you've got to nail that first impression that much more to either get another visit or to help you stay in consideration for the kids that are a little bit further away from home.
Yeah, and I've always thought, and I'll wrap up on this because you made a point early in talking about the facilities. It's probably not going to be the shiniest or the fanciest because it's not going to be Oregon, it's not going to be Ohio State, it's not going
It
to be
shouldn't
Alabama,
be either,
and
by
it
the way.
shouldn't be.
Right.
But I've always thought Wisconsin, they just need to stay in the mix with the Nebraskas, the Iowas. They can't get outpaced or outran by really that 10 to 30 tier, right? And I think that keeps them in that tier.
100%, and then look, they're probably closer to 10 than 30 in that tier. But this will enhance that, and again, just be another tool to sell. I mean, and that's really what it's about. How many resources do you have versus the next guy? And that stuff becomes important, especially, and not even for just the kids, parents, high school coaches, the other decision makers that are around the
Mhm.
kids will say, this study hall, this dining hall, this is kind of a big deal. And they can start to reiterate that to the kids and the recruits themselves more so than they will see just on the surface level. So it's not just for recruits, it's for those around these kids as well.
John, thank you so much as always for your time. Where can people find the great work that you do?
Appreciate the kind words. Yeah, real simple, si.com/college, or find us on Twitter as well, John Garcia _JR.
All right, John, we'll hopefully get you on again next week. John Garcia, Locked On's college football recruiting insider, Sports Illustrated college football recruiting director. Go check out his work. Awesome guy, super insightful. Thank you, John.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan.
All right, I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Badgers one of your first listens every day. Again, we are here for your team every single day. Really appreciate everyone listening. Really appreciate the support for the show. If you have a second, you enjoy the content, take just a quick second, subscribe, leave a comment. Give me your feedback. We'll throw it on the show. I love the discourse. We're here for it. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. Locked On Big Ten is hosted by Nate Dickinson. He takes you around the Big Ten Conference in 30 minutes. Get caught up on all of our rivals, what's happening in the Big Ten. Make that your second listen. And with that, really appreciate everyone listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk later.